They say the biggest mistakes don't happen in the dark. They happen in the boardroom, under bright fluorescent lights, accompanied by the sound of expensive pens hitting paper. Imagine having an $800 million secret, a secret that keeps your stock price high while your customers' resentment grows like a fever. Imagine being offered the keys to the future for the price of a private jet, and laughing the person out of the room because you think the world will never change. In Dallas, we have a saying, "Don't get so busy looking at the fence that you forget to watch the horizon." This company didn't just ignore the horizon. They tried to pretend it didn't exist. And by the time they realized the storm was here, the doors were already locked from the outside. Let's look at the ledger. Strategy. A roadmap for dominance under uncertainty. The line between a calculated gamble and a slow-motion suicide. Victory is by design. Failure is by default. Before we talk about the death, we have to talk about the life. The year was 1985, Dallas, Texas. David Cook isn't thinking about movies. He's thinking about the oil patch. Cook was the brain behind Cook Data Services. He spent years building high-level software to track drilling equipment and geological data for the Texas oil giants. But then, the patch went dry. The industry tanked, and Cook was sitting on a sophisticated database system with no customers left in the oil field. He didn't panic. He looked for another fragmented industry that needed a dose of Texas-sized logistics. He found it in the video store. Back then, your local video shop was a mom-and-pop operation. They tracked tapes on index cards. Cook saw that a movie was just another piece of inventory, no different than a drill bit or a pipe fitting. He took that $6 million oil industry database, repurposed it for VHS tapes, and built a warehouse in Garland that could track millions of titles in real time. Blockbuster wasn't born in Hollywood. It was born in the Texas oil bust. It was a data company that just happened to rent movies. And that data gave them a weapon that no local store could fight. But Cook didn't just want to be a data company. He wanted to be a monopoly. Once they had the oil industry software locked in, they started the great expansion. In the early 90s, Blockbuster practiced what I call predatory real estate. They didn't just look for profitable corners, they looked for where the local mom-and-pop shops were thriving. They would buy the lease right across the street, flood the shelves with 10 times the inventory, and outspend them on local radio ads until the small business owner couldn't pay the light bill. It was a Texas-sized land grab. They weren't just renting movies, they were clear-cutting the competition. They used a tactic called cluster mapping. They'd put 5 stores in a 10-mile radius, even if it meant the stores were competing with each other. Why? Because it created a blue and yellow wall that no other brand could climb over. But here's the strategic debt they were taking on. Fixed overhead. Every store was a lease. Every store was a payroll. Every store was a light bill. They were building a physical empire in a world that was about to go virtual. They were winning the land war just as the air war was beginning. Friction. The hidden operational tax that drains capital. The resistance encountered when a machine fights itself. Momentum is expensive. Drag is fatal. Let's look at the ledger. 2004, revenue is at an all-time high. But the company is sick. They are addicted to bad profit. In business, there's good profit, money people give you because they love your product. And there's bad profit, money people give you because they are frustrated or trapped. Blockbuster's bad profit was the late fee. Imagine you're a CEO in Dallas. You see $800 million on the balance sheet from late fees. That money pays for the private jets, the marketing, the dividends. If you remove the late fee to make the customer happy, that $800 million vanishes. This is the innovator's dilemma. Blockbuster couldn't innovate because they were too expensive to save. They were held hostage by their own greed. When Netflix came along and said, "No late fees," it wasn't just a better service. It was a declaration of war on Blockbuster's bank account. They couldn't pivot because pivoting meant bankruptcy. They chose to bleed out slowly instead of cutting off the limb to save the body. Let's perform a forensic audit on the late fee. To the average customer, it was a nuisance. To the Lone Star Report, it was a friction-based revenue model. By 2000, Blockbuster was bringing in nearly $800 million a year just in penalties. That's more than the GDP of some small countries. But look closer at the math. The movie cost them about $5 to get on the shelf thanks to their revenue share deals with Hollywood. If you kept that movie for 2 extra days, you paid for the entire cost of the tape. They became addicted to this bad profit. When you make 16% of your money from your customers' mistakes, you stop trying to make your customers happy. You start hoping they're forgetful. It's the ultimate strategic trap. They couldn't remove the late fee to compete with Netflix because that $800 million was the only thing keeping their massive real estate debt from collapsing. They were a shark that couldn't stop swimming, or it would drown in its own leases. And that's the context for the most expensive laugh in history, when Reed Hastings sat across from them in that Renaissance Tower boardroom and asked for $50 million to take Netflix off the table. The blockbuster giants didn't see a bargain. To them, $50 million was a joke. They chose the addiction. They chose the late fees. They chose to stay on the throne of a kingdom that was already on fire. Autopsy, a post-mortem exam to discover the cause of collapse, dissecting the exact moment the heart stopped beating. We look for the fracture in the foundation. Now for the part they don't want you to know, the digital ghost. In 2000, right down the road in Houston, Blockbuster partnered with Enron to build a fiber optic streaming service. They called it Project Braveheart. They were testing movies on demand in cities like Seattle and New York, while Netflix was still just a mailing service. But the project failed for one reason: the franchisees. The guys who owned the physical stores in your neighborhood saw the internet as a threat to their milk dud sales. They sued. They blocked the tech. They clung to the bricks and mortar while the world was moving to the cloud. By the time Blockbuster finally launched Total Access in 2006, a brilliant plan that let you return mail-in DVDs to the store, it was too late. They were spending $2 on every $1 they made. The friction had become a fire. The empire fell in 2010, not because the technology changed, but because the leadership was too arrogant to admit that their $800 million drug was killing them. The blue and yellow signs flickered out across the globe, leaving behind empty parking lots and hollowed-out strip malls. Except for one. Deep in the high desert of the Cascade Mountains, a single neon sign refused to go dark. The Bend, Oregon outpost. Today, it isn't a business. It's a pilgrimage. A living museum for a generation that misses the tactile friction of a plastic case and the smell of popcorn and magnetic tape. I'm Cade Sterling. The Strategy Vault is closed, for now. We've seen the empire crumble. We've seen the fires. But every ending is just a new beginning for someone else. Next time on the Lone Star Report, we're following the trail of the digital ghost that haunted the Dallas boardroom for a decade. It started with a $40 late fee and ended with the total disruption of the American evening. Most people think Netflix won because they were nice. I'm going to show you how they were cold-blooded. We're looking at the leap of faith that almost bankrupted them, the Quickster disaster that made the world laugh, and the $12 billion content war that made the world watch. They didn't just change how we rent movies, they changed the chemistry of the human brain. It wasn't a transition. It was an execution. We're opening the vault on the Netflix assassin. Stay sharp.